Welcome back to the Spiritual Spotlight series, where we dive into the conversations that will awaken your soul, expand your awareness, and reconnect you to who you truly came here to be. Have you ever had that quiet, persistent feeling that something in your life is missing, but you can't explain what it is? Like you're moving through your days, checking the boxes, and doing what you're supposed to do. But deep down, you know there's something more purpose, more alignment, more truth. Today's guest will help you to reconnect you to that part of yourself. Katherine Flynn is a channeler of ancient Druid consciousness and an elemental mentor who guides individuals through profound internal shifts, helping them rediscover their purpose and step into the next chapter with clarity and confidence. By blending ancient earth wisdom with practical real life intelligence, Katherine creates a space where spiritual guidance becomes not something you receive, but something you actually live. Her work is rooted in the belief that you are not lost. You're simply being called back into alignment with who you've always been. In this conversation, we're going to explore what it really means to uncover your highest purpose, how to navigate the in between space of transformation, and how to begin living a life that feels fully aligned, vibrant, and true to you. So if you're feeling that inner nudge lately, then this episode is for you. Katherine, thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Rachel.
I'm so excited. So we are going to jump right in.
Perfect.
So you say that people might feel like something essential is missing. What
hmm
is that feeling actually pointing you to?
Yeah. So the feeling is really pointing to you to a misalignment, probably to your path and purpose. So you maybe are a little misaligned to it. You got off, you got caught up in just the mundane parts of life. And so it's really about that realignment back.
So, was there a moment where your life clearly split into before purpose and after purpose, and what happened?
Oh my gosh, it totally did. So I found that life was getting really unsettled. Things at work were really tough, and I had my dream job, and I'm like, what is happening here? This is what I love. That was happening. I was finding that, a relationship I was in was ending. Just everything was just nothing could go right. And after really trudging along for a while, I ended up getting into a car accident, and I heard, "Are you done?" And I was like, okay. And so I quit my job the next week. I still worked for a little bit after that to help them get through because I did love what I do or what I did. And so that was kind of my catalyst of, okay, you need to go in a different direction here. And because I had been pushing away my ability to channel and my gifts and all of those things. So I did about a 5-year exploration of who am I? What am I looking for? Getting back on my path to really live a life of joy and vibrancy.
So, when you heard that in the car accident, are you
hmm
done? Like,
hmm
was that the druids or was that something else that was talking to you?
It was the druids who were talking to me. Yeah. Yeah. They had kind of been pushing me for a while that, you know, you you're a channel, you're going to do this full time someday, you're going to support others. But I was just kind of kicking the can down the road in some ways, like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. Oh yeah, I'll get to that. Or, I'd see a client here or there, but that was really them being like, okay, let's go. Now's the time.
Wow. I know that we're going to jump more into the
hmm
druid consciousness, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the alignment and then we're going to go to
hmm
druids.
Okay.
So, what do you feel like are the biggest signs that someone is living out of alignment with their purpose, but they're ignoring it?
hmm Really, it is that you just feel like something's off. You're not finding joy every day. You're not happy about your life. You're getting up and going, oh gosh, like it's another day. You're not popping out of bed going, oh, okay, what's gonna today take? And when you feel that shift in the alignment, even the really hard things, the things that we don't want to do, they're not as bad because we're like, I'll just get it over with. I'll just go, and then I'll get back in, I'll meet, with the tax guy and just deal with it and then move on, or whatever it is for each person. And so there's that really push of, hey, I can get through this and I can go on to the next thing. And there's always things that we're going to have to do that really don't call to us, but they're just part of life. And so, but you'll find that they don't affect you as much. Or you find ways to, like if grocery shopping is not your thing, well, maybe you figure out, you know what, I can do a store pickup or I can have them delivered. Ways to get around it that maybe before you didn't really think about because you were just stuck in the sludge of life.
And why do you think that so many people, and I would imagine even now, so we're recording this in 2026. I feel like this is
Hmm.
a big deal now with everything that's going on.
Hmm.
So why do you feel like so many people subconsciously avoid stepping into their purpose even when they feel it calling to them?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of expectations around people, whether it comes from their family, their friends, society. We're all told, okay, you get out of school and then you get the job and then you get the house and then you have the family and you need the 401k and you need all of these things to check all these boxes. But the key is not everyone maybe needs all those things or wants them to look in a certain way. There's a belief out there that work should be hard and oh,
Mm,
I made it to retirement. And in my mind, yes, we all may retire or may not at some point. If you love what you do enough, you just kind of slow down what you do. But it's about how can we take what we truly love and turn that into our life's work? Turn it into our work instead of saying, well, what I love to do is a hobby, but I could never turn that in. Like, let's think outside the box. Let's think about how we can do things differently. And when we can do that and we can kind of stand up against society or go to our, family or friends and go, but no, this is what I love. Like, I can do this. And if you put, your whole self into it, you'll notice that that alignment will really help you. And when you're truly aligned, I always say the universe gives you exactly what you need. It may not be what you want, but it's what you need. And I found that out throughout my journey as well, going,
yeah,
well, I don't want that. Like, no, I was trying to avoid it and it was like, just accept it. I was like, oh, it's exactly what I needed. And now I love it. So, really looking at it from that standpoint.
I like that. So you say that people feel like life can be an uphill battle when they're off
Mhm.
path. How can someone tell the difference between resistance that's meant to grow them versus resistance that means this isn't your path?
Yeah, I think it's when you keep hitting that brick wall.
Mm,
People will just continue going because they'll say, well, no, I want this. I want this. And when you hit that, you keep hitting that brick wall. And at some point, it's like, okay, you're not getting through it. So how can you alter it? When you're on your path and you're just hitting resistance for growth, you're hitting that brick wall, but you notice a brick falls down each time. So you're like, okay, maybe I need to think differently to be able to either collapse the wall or climb over the wall that now that it's shorter or go, or dig a tunnel under the wall. So it's just about really connecting in. And as you're connected with your intuition and your soul, you're really going to notice those parts that connect you to, hey, I need to make this adjustment or I need to go a different direction. And I always tell people, if you truly want to, make handmade furniture, I'll use that as an example, and you're finding like, okay, it's hard to get the tools, it's hard to have the time. It's like
right.
maybe look at it from a different direction. Like maybe instead of starting with this ornate, dining room table, let's just work on chairs first. And because you can get the time and love those, and then you'll finally notice that someone calls you and says, hey, can you make a table for all of those chairs that I bought from you? So it'll just naturally allow it to come through. So enjoy the journey to get where you want to go in life. People always say, we always go, well, I want to be here. I want to make this much money. I want to have this house. I want to do this. But you know what? If you had it all today, you wouldn't have seen the work it took. You wouldn't have seen what
Yeah.
you learned, what you experienced. So enjoy the journey of it. You'll get there.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Enjoying the journey. And it's almost like I feel like we forget part of the journey and all the steps that you have taken along the way
Hmm.
to get from building the chairs and now building the table.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we forget to enjoy those little moments of that
Yeah.
journey. So what do the elements, earth, air, fire, water, actually teach us about our life path when we learn to listen to them?
Yeah. So they teach us so much. So, I always look at Mother Nature and Mother Earth as, we are all her children. Every, even the smallest microbe of bacteria or fungus is part of her. And the elements really teach us a lot in just life in general. And so you look at Earth, and Earth is all about foundation. It's
Mm,
about, what are your core pillars? What makes you stand up? So I always use the example of a house with clients. I'll say, okay, what is your foundation built on? Who are you? What is your passion? What is it that you love? Is it your family, your friends? Is it, what is it? And so we really kind of work through that. And so when you can ground into that foundation, when you can go sit with earth, and I have a lot of people say, go sit under a tree or go hug a tree and then journal about it and have it tell you what it comes through. Uh, that builds that foundation. And then you go on to water, and water is all about cleansing, clearing emotions. And it's like, what do you need to wash away? What no longer serves you? And maybe when you were building your foundation, you found out there are some things that just aren't for you anymore. So then water really takes those and pushes those away, and clears those out. And then air, air is your life force energy. It's also about balance and harmony. And people will, I always ask people, I'll say, what is the one thing you need to live? And they're like, water. And I'm like, no, it's actually air. Because if without oxygen to breathe, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't last long. We can last a lot longer without water than we can air. But we all remember that class we took in first grade where we had to learn,
I
oh,
love
we
that.
need water over food. so
I love that.
so, then we look at that, working with breath work in the air and feeling that movement of air through different ways. And then you move into fire. And fire is where, you really see that transformation. You figured out what your passions were in foundation and maybe cleared them off and cleaned them up a little bit. But, when does those ignite? When does that spark and you really kind of ignite and you say, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. And then the last one then is celestial or ether, where it's like, hey, where's your soul at in this? Where's this
Mm,
direction your soul wants you to take? Because if you've done all the work with the earth elements, it should really just align you to your soul and your path, and really allow for you to continue on that journey.
I love that. So, how does ancient Druid wisdom differ from modern day spiritual teachings that we're like seeing all over social
Mhm.
media now?
Yeah. So, the ancient wisdom they have is they were, the Druids were healers of their time. They were big on utilizing the energy of the earth, Reiki energy. They used plants and herbs to really help people heal and to really kind of align them. They lived outside city centers. So they were, people would come to them in a way of like, hey, can you support me in this? And so, their wisdom is all about how can you embrace life. We all know that we incarnated here and there's something that we want to accomplish in this lifetime. And so they really want to support everyone in doing that. So a lot of the modern stuff kind of comes through and you can tell it's a little more adjusted to what is happening in everyday life right now. Like there was the big kick of manifestation, oh, I'm going to manifest that. And
Yeah.
and I never knew why I never would say it. And I'd be like, okay, yeah. But for me, it was always alignment. And I realized because the
Mm,
Druids were telling me, they're like, no, if you align to it, you're going to get what you need. It's not about what you want. So it's not about the materialism. It's about what you need. And so you may get more than what you wanted,
right.
but you're gonna be happy with it. You might not have the gazillion dollars, but you might be happy with $1 million. You're like, oh, but I can still do everything I want. So that's really kind of where they come in. It's about rerouting into your life, rerouting into the earth. Our bodies are all the earth element. People will say, oh, but I'm this spiritual being. I'm just here. It's like, no, you're also earth. You have this body, this physical form. Like,
Right.
work with it, love it, let it do things that you can't do in a spiritual form. You can see so much better, using your eyes, your senses. So, really kind of leaning into that.
Do you feel like we're in a time where people are being pulled back to earth based spirituality for a reason?
I think we are. I think we're all trying to root down back into Earth. Uh, there's a lot of push of the galactics,
Mm,
channeling them, understanding them, and they've got some great insight and knowledge. But in a recent book that I wrote a chapter in, the Druids really talked about, they are part of that. There you go. They are part of that. There it is. And Rachel also has a chapter in the book. And so, they talked about how when you're coming in, you have to take the knowledge and you have to see, how does it apply? How does it apply to Earth? And so I think we're all kind of reverting back to Earth, and you're seeing a lot more with herbalism and natural healing and
Yes.
alternative healing, that people are going, okay, if these bodies are from Earth, we need to heal them with Earth. And so, how can we really take what we're understanding from others and just going back and rooting back down into it? And so, that was a really pivotal point where I go, okay, that makes sense. That really connects in with what's going on, and I think that's part of it.
I love that.
So,
And for anyone that's interested, the name of the book is Get Ready, They're Here,
mhm.
Preparing for Open Contact, a guide for humanity in the age of awakening. And
Yeah.
both Catherine and I and the other co-authors won a
Mhm.
literary award.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Yeah, it's such an interesting book about how all of this, really comes together. And
Yes,
yeah.
I love
So,
that. I love
yeah.
that. So you channel ancient druid consciousness. What
Mhm.
exactly does that mean? And how did you first realize that it wasn't just intuition, but something deeper?
Mhm. So, I unexpectedly channeled one day. I was reading tarot cards and it kind of came through. And so I did not try to channel. I did not expect to channel. And then, as I grew that ability with my guides, I noticed that this druid figure was really around me all the time. It looks like a cloaked figure, dark, really like gnarly arthritic fingers. I'd be like, you can leave. And he'd be like, well, why? And I'd ask Archangel Michael, I'm like, can he go? And he's like, why? What's wrong with him? And I'm like, oh, well, if you're okay with it, I guess I'm okay with it. Like, why not? And so it was just over time. Then I said, okay, I got to see who this guy is, because everybody's okay with him being around. He kind of creeps me out, but like, let's see what he's all about. And so I then kind of began channeling him and figured out it was a druid, and I had no idea what druids were prior to that. So that was a whole thing of
Yeah.
learning. But it really allowed for me to connect in, and then I connected into all the past lives that I had, and all of those parts of me that are very druidish, and the fact that I look very druidish in this lifetime. I'm the only one in my family with red hair. I'm really tall. So yeah, so I mean, I
Wow.
all of those little bits of that society kind of came through within me.
Wow. So when you're
Mhm.
channeling source or druid consciousness, and I imagine
Mhm.
you channel a lot of other different things, how do you know it's not just your mind? And maybe how can others learn that level of discernment?
hmm It's really about kind of connecting in to really understand what is the druids and what is you. And I always tell people, part of it is to learn what is your intuition versus ego. When you can start to
Mm,
discern that and practice that, and then when you can get that intuition, that is then when you can discern, okay, because I'm a believer anyone can channel, that we all have the ability, we just might have it in different ways. And so then it's okay, once you do that, let's move on to the next, area, bringing in. And I always tell people, bring in a guide, bring in someone that you're really connected with their energy, because it is very energetically draining to channel. And so, but
yeah,
if you can do someone it's closer to your energy, then you can kind of move on from there. But it's about trust yourself, trust in what you have. And I always tell people, if you think you're channeling, do a session for someone that maybe you don't know. Say, hey, can I've met you 3 times. I'm trying this out. Or reach out to a friend that you don't know as well, because you're going to find you're going to get information that you wouldn't be able to know. And that's a good way to keep your ego out of it, because
so
the ego,
true.
if I was to read a friend, my ego is going to go, well, we know this and this and this and this and this, and it might be my intuition, but there could be that little bit of pulling through of something else if you're just starting out and using your abilities.
What do you think is the biggest misconceptions that people have about channeling and psychic work right now?
I think some of it is that there's some that maybe aren't as valid as
Mm,
others are. I think there's this big push of, well, I can use my intuition, or the energy is right, or I'm vibrating at this level. So I think there's people that talk the talk but haven't done the work. And I think that's some of the misconceptions, is that I do believe everyone has it, but I think it takes a lot of work to really put that ego away and to really let that settle down. So yeah, but I think we're all going to get there as the earth is ascending and vibrationally and
Mm,
energetically changing. I think we'll all get there. It's just like the cool fad right now. The same way like oh, I manifested that was popular, many years
yeah.
ago.
And
So,
I also remember like when I first started doing like channeling and Akashic work, like, the biggest thing is that we set our ego as a conscious bystander. Like it's like
mhm.
you really have to let your soul lead is your higher self,
Mhm.
and like, okay, because you don't
Yeah.
want to get a mixed message coming in, because you're right, like I love your idea of
Mhm.
read for somebody you haven't read for that you don't know, because I can
Mhm.
imagine right now if I were to read from one of my friends, I know my ego would be like, well, and it's like that's not going to give them a good reading. It's going to be a bias. Like Rachel is going to
Mhm.
be like, well, you should. No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the more you do it and the more comfortable you get, you get to a point where it's like you can read for your friends and family.
Yes,
And so I
yeah.
think that's the other thing for people to know, like as you can trust yourself and understand the energies, you can read for your friends and family all day long.
I
So
love that. I love that. Have you ever received a message that challenged you or made you question, like, maybe your current belief systems?
um, I think the biggest one was when, I heard the message of "Are you done yet?" Going, how am I, channel, you're going to quit your job and you're just going to like figure it out, I mean,
It's
that's the
huge.
unknown. Yeah. I mean, and to trust that financially I'd be taken care of, that my mortgage would get paid, that I'd have all this. And, it's really, it worked out for me because I just allowed the trust and I allowed things to happen. I'm still surprised at how things will pop up and, or I'll get a call from a friend saying, "Hey, can you, do you want to travel here with me and meet me here?" And I'm like, where did that come from? And how am I gonna pull this together? And then it all comes together.
I love that.
So yeah, but it took a lot of time and a lot of banging my head against a wall at times, where I'm like, come on, help me out, where my expectations weren't their expectations. So
I love
mhm.
that. And I
Mhm.
love that is you bring up a good point though about, like, I know that this is a lot of people talk about like surrendering to the universe or surrendering,
Mhm.
and really like trusting that the universe has your back. Was
Mhm.
ever a time that maybe you didn't feel that way, that you had to reconnect back in, and what did you do?
Yeah, the words, it's funny you use the word surrender because, to me, I used to say that all the time and I used to do it. It's like, oh, just surrender to the energy. And then I realized I don't really want to surrender. I don't want to throw up my white flag and go, I'm done. Like, just take me to wherever you need to go. So I look at it more as I'm just going to go into an allowance mode. So I'm going to allow them, like, I'll still walk where they need me to go, but I'm not going to make them drag me there. And so that sense of an allowance or allowance is really about saying, okay, I'm going to move in this direction. I'm still going to have some autonomy. I'm still going to maybe question, like, well, why are we going this way? But it's saying I have faith in you and I have trust in where I need to go, and I'm going to allow you to take me here, but I'm not going to give up my total free will or my beliefs to surrender into this. And there were many times that I was having major conversations with the druids, like, but are you sure? But are you sure? So,
I appreciate you answering the question that way, because I
mhm,
myself have such a hard time with surrender. Like, and I
mhm.
will say that, and I have for 20 plus years have been like, oh, like just the idea. And I'm like, what does it even mean? Like, am I supposed to quit my job and move to Bali and like put up a flag? And I am going to shift my mind to allowance. I thank you. Like, I must
You're
have needed to
welcome.
hear that, because can't tell you how many times I've been driving down the road and I'm listening like to an audio book and it's like surrender, and I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I just
Yeah,
but
because
why?
if you surrender, you're going to throw up your white flag and just fall down and go, okay, well, you deal with it now. And I'm
Then
like,
yeah,
yeah, and I did that a few times, and I did not like the outcome. So,
Like I do believe that we are co-creating with the universe, and we need to be a willing participant in this so-called thing of life.
mhm,
Like as a human, a soul having a human experience in a human body living on the earth, I need to be a
mhm,
willing participant here.
mhm.
And I'm going to go into allowance.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Give it a try. Let me know how it works out for you.
Oh, I will.
Because
I'll be like,
yeah, you messaging me like, hey, Catherine,
guess
I
what?
figured it out. Yeah.
Because it's been such, I will say, it's been a resistance on my path of like this
Hmm.
whole idea of surrendering to the universe. Like I know the universe will provide and I'm going to be okay no matter what. Like I know that, I have faith
Yeah.
in that. But the idea of surrendering to me just seems like such a, I give up. Like I don't know
Hmm.
why, and maybe that's not
Hmm.
the right, maybe that's not what they're meaning, but that's how I feel. So
I took it the same way. So I think we're onto something here.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. I'm like,
You're
this is the
welcome.
best thing. This is the best thing that's come out of this. I love that. So
Yeah.
you emphasize, I think this is really important, that action after channeling.
Hmm.
Why is
Hmm.
insight alone not enough for transformation?
Hmm. Because if you take what you get, we all get knowledge, but it's about taking that action to say, I'm going to try it. The same way, you can read 100 cookbooks, but until you actually make something out of one of them, you really haven't learned anything. You really haven't seen how it is. And so I look at intuition and channeling and messages in the same way. It's like, what do you need to integrate? What do you need to really allow for you to allow to come in? And that is when you'll see that change. That is when you'll push yourself in a direction you haven't been pushed before to really open up to the possibilities that are there.
I love it. What does it actually look like to turn a spiritual message into a real life plan?
Well, a lot of self and reflection, the first thing. But it's looking at, okay, with the message you received, how is this applicable? And it's not saying, jump in, and change
Surrender.
your entire life. Yeah, surrender. But maybe it's about making smaller changes. And I always tell my clients, I go, okay, you received this message, and perhaps we'll use the example like it's about, adjusting your lifestyle so that you can have more, balance. Maybe air was the element that they were really struggling in. And I'll say, okay, you don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to start like going for walks and meditating, but like, what can you do for 5 minutes each day? Where can you take the deep breath? Where can you pause for a moment? And then the next week, maybe you add something else in. And then all of a sudden, you find within a few weeks or a few months that you found that balance, that you do, now you go for a walk for 30 minutes a day outside or sit under a tree or you have plants in your home or you have a garden outside. So it's just about taking those small baby steps because even we know that when you're trying to make a change and you go all the way to the end and then you overwhelm yourself and you quit because you weren't successful. It's the same thing with messages. The same thing, but it's about consistency, it's about the tenacity of it, and it's about just having faith that you can do this, and make it work for you.
I love that. Why do so many people stay spiritually aware but still stuck in the same patterns?
Because of change. You can be spiritually aware, but if you're giving yourself excuses, if you're giving yourself things that just really don't, aren't allowing you to make that shift, that's what's going to happen. And so it, I mean, being spiritually aware is really looking at, and we are all human, we're all going to do things, there's things that I'm like, yeah, I should change that, but I'm not going to right now. We all have those moments. But it's really about knowing like, okay, what is really going to push me forward and move on my path, and what maybe doesn't matter as much,
Mhm.
and what is really really a calling to me with what I need and where I'm at. And so I think that's the big part of it. But if you're spiritually aware and you're not doing it, you're almost a little stunted at times, because how can you get the next message if you're not taking the action on what needs to be taken? But I'm also a believer that if you really, really need to do it, the universe is going to do it for you. It's going to find a way to go, hey, this is going to happen. The same way I needed to quit my job probably, a year ago. And I was like, no, and avoidance and all this. And they're, like, okay, we're going to make this rough for you. So.
And I do think you bring up a very valid point. There are certain things that will keep repeating and getting louder and more serious. And it's like that lesson of, okay, this is,
Hmm.
you're here to learn this and you're not learning it. And guess what?
Yeah. Yeah,
Something's going to
you're
crumble.
exactly. And it will crumble, and maybe it needed to crumble. People I feel bad at times when people are hanging on to something so tight. And it's like, you know what, maybe it needs to crumble. I mean, you're left with pieces, but let it crumble and let something new be reborn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And be okay with that. Why do you feel like we get so stuck in not wanting to make change and being okay with feeling uncomfortable?
Yeah. I think change is hard for humans. Everyone says they like it, but when it goes against the grain, or it's difficult for us to shift. And there are some people that are better than others. Uh, it becomes problematic, and so we fight back on it, or this is what we're used to, or this is what's easy. And so it can become difficult in that respect. But I think the more you lean into change, you lean into what's coming, you'll have more of a resonance to it. It'll be easier because you'll just know, and you're looking forward to the next thing. Like, I look forward to the next change in life. And sometimes I think I'm not living in the present enough because I'm already like, oh, I can see that coming. I can see that coming. And so I'm like trying to run to get there. And I'm like, no, just enjoy the journey. It's
Yeah.
coming. And so it's about really kind of shifting that perspective of it, and knowing that life is about change. Our physical bodies are changing every single moment of the day, with
Yeah.
cellular turnover and aging and, whatever it is. But we're constantly changing. And so we need to kind of embrace that part of life, and who we are.
I love that. So you talk about the world waking up. What do you think is actually
Mhm.
happening right now on a collective level?
I think as a collective, as I mentioned before, I think we're going back to the basics. We're going back to, alternative natural healing, understanding that Western can be really good at times and there's a necessity for it. But that, if we can shift our, what we eat, if we can shift who we are, if we can lean into the elements, if we can become a little more spiritually connected to Earth, that it will allow for us. So I see that as kind of the next trend, of things. And I think it can be good. It's just about how do we meld what we already know with what's coming in, the ancient wisdom, the modern wisdom, meld it to see what's best. And it might be different for every single being, every single person, but how can they meld that to really make it work overall?
I like that. If someone listening feels like they're being called into something bigger, but they're scared, what would you say directly to them?
Yeah, I would say start with something small and just trust what's coming in. Trust that you're going to have a great meeting with that person at work. Trust that, maybe your kids are going off to college, that it's going to be okay, that you're going to have something to fill your time. As many parents go, oh gosh, what am I going to do? Like, it's so odd the second they leave, but just have faith and trust in that. And when you can trust yourself and your soul and your guides, that is truly the first step.
I love that. And before I ask you the last question, if anyone is
Mhm.
interested in booking a session with you or
Mhm.
anything like that, where is the best place for them to go
Yeah.
to?
The best place to go to is my website, which is thechanneledsource.com. And if you're unsure of, kind of how I work and what I do, I always suggest booking the complimentary session called A Moment to Connect, just to, chat about where you're at and how perhaps the druids and the channelings and the systems can work, for them as they're looking for a little more direction in life.
I love that. It's amazing.
Mhm.
So, for our final question, do you believe that we choose our life path before we're born? And if so, why do we forget it?
I do think we choose it before we're born. I think we come in knowing the path and direction. I do think that our consciousness forgets a little bit because it is about us really having that faith in that we are on our path and listening to our heart and our soul of where we need to go. And so when you do that, it really allows for you to come in. If we came in knowing exactly what it was when we were an infant, we wouldn't have so much of the journey. Earth is about free will. It's about experiences. It's about, having fun and enjoying it. And if we knew what it was, we probably wouldn't make so many mistakes and learn so much, and we might not have as much fun along the way. So I'm happy at times we forget it in some ways, but if you really dig in and use the elements to find what you love, what you enjoy, where your balance is, you're going to naturally come across it. And then the key is, are you brave enough to maybe take the leap or even just take a few steps to get there?
I love it. Catherine, it has been amazing to connect with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. This was a really pleasure chatting with you today.